Austin, good to see you. Thanks for making a bit of time to come and have a chat with me. Today, we're going to talk about something that I think is actually quite timely here because we've just got a new Prime Minister here in the UK. We're going to talk about smart government and, in particular, some of the stuff that you're doing around trying to use AI to help, if you like, smarten up government or help government do things in smarter ways. Just for the folks that are listening, I mean, why? I mean, how did you get into that area and why is it important to you?
Sure. The origin story of a company, a lot of times is, this sort of solo individual's passion story from college, right? I thought of this or that. For me, it's a little different route. I was a designer and tech developer for decades, working at the crossroad of healthcare, consumer goods, and so forth. And as things became more technical through the .com, we were working on everything from microfluidics to photocatalysis in combination with the user side of the story, the equipment that would be used. So around 2015, I started working in the area of AI. We were working with large meta tag engines, these huge databases of information that took, just eons of expensive engineering time for cleaning the data and aligning the data. And the way to think about that is if you have a pile of data numbers, they could be the age of women in Oregon, where I live. And another pile of data could be the number of doctors and where they're located in Oregon. And that could be two other pieces of data. And each one of those has a tag saying that number, 26, represents the age of one person. That's the meta tag. So you have this huge pile of information,
Yeah.
and you have all of these tags, and it allows the database to query that pile of information and make correlations. Oh, okay, the average female doctor in Oregon is 32 years old. And that would be information that you could extract. So if you think about the human intelligence and AI, you start with just raw data, just information that's out there. That gets translated into clean information. From that, you can create knowledge. And from the knowledge, you can create insight. And that's what the human brain does to a certain extent,
Yeah.
is we take
Yeah.
this huge amount of information and then transfer it to insight. Well, so I was working in that, and I was also I had been a global director at Intel, and we were working with these huge platforms in healthcare where there has tons of information and private data, and you're trying to solve, if I prescribe this medicine, what other medicines might interact with it in a negative way. There's so much information that the medical community and the doctors and everybody else is involved with, that I could see that this sort of rapidly emerging, at the time, meta tag engines, but artificial intelligence, where it was going. I could see the collision between that and these highly complex societal problems, needs, if you will. So that was the insight. I'd sat at the insight of these technological waves in the past, but at this one I was like, I think I have an idea here,
Mm.
fairly simple one, about how we could apply AI to make governments more effective as well as more efficient.
And
So that's where the
let me ask you, is your interest in that because government, if you like, whether it's local government or central government, I mean, is it because they have vast quantities of data that needs to be used effectively? Is that why you're particularly interested in smart government? Because it could just be smart organizations, couldn't it? I mean,
Yeah,
what's the
sure.
particular interest in government?
Well, there are a couple of things. First of all, as a designer, again, you start to realize that the orchestration of all of the information around a problem is the critical
Yeah.
issue in solving. And to a certain extent, that's what we're all doing as individuals in our workplaces and so forth. I think that there's also a part of it that maybe comes from a personal side, is that, I have this belief that uh, legitimacy of government is derived from a consent of the people.
Mhm.
Uh, and so, in the sense that if we're going to use data in the same way that we in the United States we have HIPAA, for example, privacy laws around healthcare information. If we're going to use data in governance, how can we do it in a way that's both effective and empathetic to the populace?
Mm.
And also, we live in a very interesting time. You have a new prime minister, I believe, Andy Burnham. Is that how you
Yeah, yeah,
pronounce it?
yeah, yeah.
Yep, Andy Burnham. Um, we live in a time where the challenges are stronger than ever, and government is facing a very polarized people. I think
Mm.
part of the polarization comes from disillusionment.
Mm.
People are really exhausted by ineffective government. And when government is effective, it's uh, it's it's not efficient, or if it's efficient, it's not effective. So
Mm.
you have this kind of burnout, and I think that sometimes there are, if you could actually put a policy in place, run it efficiently and effectively, so that it's not like a nightmare of bureaucracy for the citizens to participate in it, whether it's grants or permits or whatever, that actually lowers the temperature. It creates for a better relationship between people and their government, and it creates a more effective relationship as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think your point is well made about people being frustrated with
Yeah.
inefficient or ineffective government. I mean, I think yeah, that's a well made point. I mean, we certainly see that here in the UK, but on both sides. I mean, citizens, if you like, are frustrated because they can't get the services that they need. And I think politicians are frustrated because I mean, as Tony Blair said in his biography, he pulled the levers of power and nothing happened. And I think there's
Yes,
still an element of that going on in certainly in the
100%.
UK government. So I think your point about smart government is really important, actually. Well, give us some ideas or give us your thoughts on where some obvious applications are of the sort of technology that you've developed at Epira. Give us some ideas. I mean, we haven't got time to go into detail, but give us some ideas of where, what some of the use cases might be. Where might we see AI being applied to address some of those problems, would you say?
Well, one of the things to demystify AI, and maybe even make AI is right now going through a little bit of a backlash, right?
Mm.
Because people are like,
Mm.
what does it do? Is it taking away my agency and autonomy? How can I trust it and so forth? Well, part of that is uh, creating, you know, better transparency,
Mm.
and also making sure that human decisions are always in the mix, at least for the foreseeable future. It may be that in 100 years or 50 years, there is a version of AI that's so transparent and so reliable that humans are happy to not worry about it. Like, we don't think a lot about uh, electricity coming into our homes. It just comes to our house. And,
Mm.
you don't go, hey, I'm going to run into the kitchen and use electricity. That's not the way we think about it anymore, because it's just background. It's reliable. We don't worry about it. It's proven. It's no risk. And that might be the way that we think of compute or artificial intelligence. I'm going to use the word compute a little more, because that's really what artificial intelligence is doing, is computing things. Um, that when we look into the foreseeable short-term future, we have to make this transition. In the United States, for a lot of people, their first exposure to artificial intelligence in government was um, some government efficiency efforts run by Doge,
Yeah.
which again, just being diplomatic, I don't think that the goal of making government efficient is a bad goal, right? So the goals that Doge might have had were not necessarily bad, but I felt that at least the backlash in the United States is that it was sort of haphazard. It wasn't
Yeah.
necessarily
Yeah.
done in a transparent way. Some people felt that, or feel strongly that some of the decisions and targets were arbitrary. And this isn't good governance. This isn't the way that we think of democracy. That being said, human beings are incredibly ineffective
Mm.
um, creatures, right? We have a lot of problems. So the question goes back to, well, if we're so flawed in our decision making and what we do, why would we not want to turn everything over to AI? And I believe it goes back to the whole idea of that the legitimacy is derived from consent in governance, and so we have to go back to we have to be grounded in this idea
Yeah.
that people are the autonomy and the agency of people is what is paramount.
Yeah.
And by proxy, government has to operate that way as well.
And let me ask you about that's one of those issues in there, because if you take healthcare, which is the example that you were working on, I mean, a lot of people are concerned about, as it were, AI doing diagnostic things without doctors being involved because they're worried about the AI making a mistake, right? But the
Yeah,
flip side is that doctors have made plenty of mistakes. I mean, we haven't got a situation where doctors are perfect and the AI isn't. I mean, both are able to get things wrong, aren't they? And I think in time, AI will probably be more reliable than humans. I mean,
yeah.
what's your take on that issue?
Well, I think that we're already at the stage where we're seeing this in radiography and other areas where AI is able to detect things that doctors don't even see. So the benefit is massive, and to anybody
Yeah.
who has suffered through a condition of cancer or whatever, where early detection is important. This is life-changing,
Yeah.
life-changing early diagnosis. That being said, humans are understandably reluctant to just say,
Yeah.
I'm going to just turn this all over to a technology that isn't completely proven yet. So there's a transition here, and what we will find is not tomorrow, but in the near future, we will continually have to return to this and review: have we do we are we retaining enough agency? Are we handing over too much or too little, and so forth? So I think we want to move more quickly, but there's that argument between efficiency and effectiveness, which is, if you're going really fast, that's great, but not if it's in the wrong direction, right?
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so we want to make sure we're going in the right direction at the right speed.
And what you're saying, just so I've understood it, what you're really saying is it's about trust. It's about whether people trust the tech, isn't it? That's what you're really saying.
Well, it trusts the tech and trusts the government. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's twofold, and the government's a proxy for people, right? You know, government represents people in theory, and we have a lot of different types of government around the world, but that's maybe a point for another day. But for today, we'll say the governments represent the people and should be representing the people's best interest. So that's one massive area of where the trust has to be. And I would say the trust in that space right now is low.
Yeah.
And then trust in technology is quite high, but trust in AI itself and trust in the government's use of the data that AI would control. Both of those two items are also low. And part of it is, we didn't do a great rollout of AI. As you just we're talking about, with Doge, that it turned a lot of people into being skeptics.
Yeah.
You're seeing a lot of backlash in the creative industries
Yeah.
as well, where people are like, "Hey, you trained these models on human history, and then you're charging human history to sell us back the insights from our own information."
Mm.
Uh, you know,
You can see
that's
why people are a bit skeptical, can't you? Despite
oh,
what the technology can do, you can see why people are skeptical.
100%, 100%, and yet. Um, what we have is a ground changing fundamental technology shift.
Mm.
The power of AI to do huge things, go through huge amounts of data and create, take away huge amounts of busy work. Uh, yes, that does affect in some ways employment, because if you're taking away busy work, you're taking away somebody's doing that right now. But moving those people to jobs that are more creatively fulfilling is should be a goal. Should be a goal for everybody. With our company Epira, our goal is not to. Um, we don't talk. Like this technology is to replace people on staff. Our thought is we want to turbocharge the people that are working in government,
Mm.
because one of the backlashes from people being frustrated with government is that people are sort of demonize the government worker. That the government worker is a bureaucrat, and they're not being efficient and all this. But that's not fair. It's not fair or compassionate or true, because the person working at the Department of Motor Vehicles is somebody who just lives right across the street from you or down in the next neighborhood over, raising kids that go to the same school as you. These are just people that are showing up to work. They're trying to do a good job. They have pride in their own work. They're frustrated that the government has, 10-year-old computers. They're frustrated that they don't have enough coworkers and the lines are too long. None of that is something that those individuals want. Those are good people,
Mm.
and they're just like you at your own job. They're just trying to do their job with what they've got at hand. So what we want to do is use AI to take away, kind of not that larger judgment area of where humans really excel and where we want humans to stay, but that kind of like long repetitious alignment and typing and of data and entry. And everybody's been on that government website where they go to enter their information for something and it times out and they have to start over, and then it asks them for a piece of information. They go to get it, they come back, it's timed out, they have to start over, they submit. 6 months later they get an email saying it's not enough information, and back and forth and back and forth. And they're generally not judgment issues. It might be a house permit. The law's already written.
Yeah. Yeah.
It should be like that, just like that. There's no reason for these things to not take the data, figure out all the data that you have relevant to the problem, the data that the government has relevant to the problem. Is there a match? If not, why? Those kind of problems can be solved so quickly. But it's a little more complicated than that. There are a couple of other very important aspects to designing systems that do that. Um,
It's
so
it sounds to me that, I mean, it must have been quite difficult to kind of get all this up and running. I mean,
we're based. I'm in the U.S. and we're based in Ireland. We're based in Dublin, Ireland, and that's you're welcome to ask me questions about that, but I won't go into exactly why. But the short story is, as a global director at Intel, I had colleagues who were also directors at Intel, and I kind of shared the vision with them, and they're like, they were in Ireland at the time,
mm,
and they said, look, there's a lot of good things going on in Ireland. Ireland's got an incredible workforce, technology literacy, and so forth. It also gave us a kind of a relationship in Europe as well as in the United States. Um, but yeah, to start it, we began with pulling together our technical team to create the base AWS instances of the technology. Now AI is helping us, create the system itself.
well,
Like a lot of companies, we are using Cloud Code and others to. What we do is we use it. I think of it as kind of like clearing a field where you have to knock down the big brush, but then the detailed stuff, the security stuff, is all still done by professional high level coders, because all of that has to be exactly perfect. We can't afford to have
yeah,
AI kind of hallucinating or making errors. We need people that are professionals in doing that.
yeah.
So our team takes over that.
Yeah, I mean, it's also the other thing that strikes me is that it's a really fast-moving field. I mean, I find it amazing that AI's only been around a couple of years in people like me, and the
Yeah.
degree to which it's evolved over the last few years. I mean, have there been any particular turning points on that journey? Because it seems to me it's a world that's evolving really quickly.
Well, I think the obvious one is the advent of LLMs in the public
Mm,
space. I started working, as I said, around 2015, 2016 on these meta tag engines, and then in 2019, I wrote an article, "The Future of Designers as Programmers," and I was really talking about people that design and specify products and services, whether they're in service design, industrial design, uh, engineering design, however they describe their own field. But the people that really study how to fit technology to people are in a very good space to
mm.
kind of brook this transition. Um, at the same time, I was also flying around globally giving talks on design and artificial intelligence. But at the time, I couldn't even imagine myself, even though I was saying it, the degree to which it would just explode post pandemic.
Yeah.
Uh, the it shocked me, even though I mean I could literally look at things I'd written and saying this is exactly what's going to happen, and to see it explode into popularity. Although think that this backlash we're seeing is because when we take a technology and we don't have necessarily a great use case for it for the public, it starts getting used in superfluous ways that don't necessarily advance the bond of the technology to the population.
Mm.
So I think that's why you see people like going, I want AI to do my dishes, not sing songs for me. I'd like to do my own singing and my own painting, please. Um, uh, so until we kind of refocus it around taking the drudgery out of life,
Mm.
instead of threatening, your agency, and I think that's we're still missing as an industry.
Yeah.
But I think there's hope for that. I think we're one of the companies that looks at the technology and says, look, we don't need to do all of this cutting edge abstract stuff that fails. Um, there was a NAN study by MIT that said 95% of initiatives were failing
Yeah.
last year.
Yeah. I read that. Yeah.
And I think the reason it's working for us is that we're focusing on that bottom level of getting the data right, making things more efficient and effective, allowing people to review their own work when they submit it, helping them do the things
Mm.
uh, that isn't heartfelt issues that they want to keep for themselves.
I mean, it's interesting you mentioned that. I mean, it's a kind of a truth of business, isn't it? Is that the bits that matter are the boring bits. Those are the bits you've got to get right.
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
not they're not that sexy to people looking in, but they're actually really important to make the system operate. Those foundations, the kind of basic
yeah.
stuff, you've got to get them right, haven't you?
Well, it's funny you say that, Paul, because I often say that, people say, well, why did you choose this? Why are you working on AI with permits and things like that? Because in the past, I've worked on 66-meter carbon fiber yachts and all these exotic medical technologies, and I've worked with U.S. Air Force and on disaster technologies and lectured at NASA and all of these kind of things that were, worked with Harley Davidson. Uh, that are kind of exciting. This is a really boring, nebbish kind of like thing to be involved with, and um, but I love it because what we're really doing is giving people back time.
Yeah.
So instead of some sexy benefit we've designed, we're actually designing something that just takes away frustration.
Mm.
And you go to get a permit for your house for a grant to put solar in, or a permit for building or whatever, and using the Epira technology, the government can process all of that data. You can enter all of that data, and it can now take minutes to do something that might have taken 4 months of frustrating time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I view it as the technology area itself is, we're dealing with grants and numbers, and it's like, ugh. But we're giving time to people, and that's
Yeah.
that's really exciting.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I totally get that. I mean, getting the fundamentals right is always important. And what is it? I mean, what is it you want to achieve exactly? I mean, what would success look like to you?
Well, I think one of the pieces of success, and this is a little bit abstract, not from a business standpoint, from a personal satisfaction
Mhm.
standpoint, is that right now, if you go to do some grant for your home, whatever, it's going to be a frustrating experience. It's going to bring out your resentment to the government. It's going to bring out your frustration
Mm.
with members of your community who work, their own frustrating jobs, trying to help you. And extracting that poison from society is, in my own personal life, just I see that as a win. Like if we can reduce that friction and heat and extract that frustration that is sort of poisoning society. As a company, I think that what is successful is that if government has policies, for example, to do electrification, to give the grid more flexibility, for example, or reduce carbon imprint footprint rather for their municipalities and so forth. If we can help them move those goals through more quickly and more effectively, it means we're spending less tax dollars, that we're being more efficient, we're delivering services more quickly, and for us as a company, we grow. And if we can do that in a way that maintains transparency and government oversight and accountability, essentially, then what we're also doing is we're increasing trust, not just in the
Yeah.
technology,
Yeah.
but in the government and also each other. I think that's pretty satisfying work if we
Yeah, no,
can.
I get that. I mean, the thing that was going through my mind as you were speaking is that we come back to this point about trust. I mean, the better that the government gets at doing those things, the more people will trust it. I mean, I think that's a really well made point. Let me ask you about building a business, being the CEO. I mean, you look like someone who enjoys it.
I do. I enjoy the creative challenge. I think there's the chief executive officer it's about execution.
Mm.
And so the greatest challenge is balancing the vision with execution. Steve Jobs once said that editing is the greatest act of creativity. I paraphrased into my own words there, but I very much agree with that. With technology, the threat is, especially with digital technologies, that you can just add everything. You
Yeah,
can anything you
yeah,
think of, you can just add to it. So stripping it down to what's essential, not making it for everybody, but it's a little like deciding where the highway runs. If the
yeah,
highway runs to every city, then it's not a highway, it's a parking lot. Everything's flattened out.
yeah.
So you have to decide uh, what are the core pathways, and then you have to execute on that. I think that's the greatest challenge. I enjoy it because seeing things manifest, things happen from a pure vision. Every time that we move closer to our technology goals, we're under NDA now with some major government agencies that are looking at the technology and evaluating. Our markets are, to start with, North America, Europe, and of course the United States and North America as a focus. But our long-term interest is to be a global technology company.
Mm.
So I do enjoy it. I mean, I think when you're bringing something that you really believe in,
Yeah.
that you really believe makes society better, then it's
Yeah, I mean,
it's
and when
it's
we've spoken about that in the past, I mean, that's always come across actually. I mean, I've always been quite impressed by that. Let me ask you about something. I mean, as you said, your ambition is to become a global player. I mean, one of the interesting, just to come back to the point we were talking about earlier, one of the interesting things is the speed at which things change. I mean, businesses evolve kind of constantly. That's been my experience. I mean, to what extent would you say you're driving that evolution, or is it reactive? Are you reacting because customers' expectations are changing? I mean, where's the balance there?
That's such a great question. I think that is the paramount question for a CEO of
Mm,
any company. I don't, whether you're selling candy at the local neighborhood shop, or you're doing a global technology, understanding where you are in relation to change is 50% of the job, right?
mm,
Uh, I think that one of the challenges is to understand the role, and I'm not sure how to exactly phrase this, but to understand the relationship between money and change. Money has, moved freely in certain circumstances and is tight in other circumstances. It reacts to certain risk profiles and so forth
mm.
in terms of investment. And change has its own metric, has to do with society and governments changing, global situations, reactions to conflicts, whether they're in the Middle East or,
Yeah.
in nationally. Navigating all of that and being relevant to which thread and which changes is most important to respond to. that's the challenge. That's the focus challenge.
They're difficult judgment calls, aren't they? There's no easy answer to a lot of those, in my view.
No, but there is one thing that I think we can ground ourselves in, and that's that, human beings, we haven't changed in,
Mm,
200,000 years. The architecture of our brain, it's relatively the same as it was when we were uh, discovering fire.
mm,
It really hasn't changed. And so all of the technology that we have created is is really based on the multiplication of brains and the effect of trust in each other. There are things that I do that I work on that I don't understand because somebody else is the expert in it. A doctor is a perfect example. I want to take care of myself, I go to a doctor
yeah,
that has all of this expertise. That doctor in turn goes to an investment banker who has expertise in money, and they in turn go to a garden professional who helps them with their yard, and so forth. Um, this whole infrastructure is built on trusting each other. That's why we're in such a difficult time right now, with the polarization and
yeah, yeah,
the losing expertise, losing trust. But if you go back to your question about, the CEO navigating change, we can always use that human truth as a touchstone. Just go back to, how do humans operate? What do we need? What do we do? What is the insight that helps
yeah,
us?
yeah,
If you are constantly refocusing your company to people and human need, if you're redesigning your technologies to be user centered in terms of the interface and how they work, if you're empathetic in all aspects to human beings involved, whether they're government workers, the
mm,
purchasing agents at the government, the people that are promoting programs, the people that are using and applying for them. If you think about them all as people and ground
yeah,
yourself, keep going back to
yeah.
that aspect of it, then you end up with a better product and um, better relevance.
Yeah. And let me ask you about the human piece, because one of the things I always think is significant is the kind of creative. I mean, humans are creative beings. I mean,
Yeah.
schools might knock a bit of creativity out of them, but fundamentally, humans are, in my view, humans are creative. To what extent would you say the kind of creative component to the people bit is critical in that adaptation process? I mean, the way I see it is that CEOs have to deal with change. They either drive it forward or they have to respond to it. But the way they do that is to a greater or lesser extent influenced by how creative they are, how they are able to kind of find solutions to things that are problematic and so on. A lot of that for me is about human creativity. I mean, what's your take on that?
I, I, you couldn't be more on point with that, because what I find for me personally is that, as someone who considers themselves a creative professional, I've worked, I've lots and lots of different patents, and I've been working in creative technology fields all my life. Uh, you believe that creativity is your core strength, but it's also your weakness, because I create in a specific area. What I found in this journey, if you will, with Epira, is that you are going to face challenges which are beyond what you're good at being creative about what you're good at abstracting on. Like, I can absorb all of this information quickly and be creative on this aspect, but then in comes this, you know, global petrol shock in pricing resulting from the, Middle East conflict, and that affects money markets in Europe, and that in turn affects this and that and the other thing. Um, and now my creativity has to, I'm challenged. I have to go, oh, okay, you know what? I'm actually not that creative in that space. And what I have to do now is be humble and seek out other CEOs, other professionals, or people that know that. And I don't mean just like high level accountants. I'm talking about other people that are facing leadership challenges in that space. I think that's one of the things that I found really interesting about your podcast. One of the reasons I'm here is that you talk almost exclusively to CEOs about the challenges and the way that they think. And I think if you're leading any kind of change or organization, uh, you really need to create that kind of mental network of how are other people solving these problems, which I've never had to face
Yeah.
before.
Yeah. I mean,
And
it's not.
that's what you really get exposed to very quickly, this
Yeah. Yeah.
humbling experience.
It's not so much what you think, but how you think, I think is important because that
It's
influences how you approach problems. And the other thing that's really interesting about that is one of the things I think is significant about building a business is the commitment. And the reason it's significant is because to make it happen over, it normally takes a period of years if you're lucky. It requires a commitment to, and it's a tough gig building a business. There's lots of difficult days. But also you have to face the consequences of your decisions. And I mean, my view is that that's where the real learning happens. That's the difference, if you like, between learning when you're doing something, learning by doing, and sort of academic learning. I'm not knocking academic learning, but learning by
yeah,
doing is about dealing with the consequences of what you've done. I've done it and it's gone well, or I've done it and it hasn't gone well. But either way, the learning is in the consequences of those actions. I mean, how do you feel about that kind of commitment?
well, I mean, how you feel about that commitment is that's part and parcel
Mm,
with with the job. But uh, I think you touched on something super interesting. I come from a family of academics. My mother's dissertation was in literature. My
right.
father is a very well known physical chemistry. Actually, went to did his PhD at Imperial College there in England, uh, and so I have incredible affection and a kind of a rooting in academic
Mm,
pursuits, if you will. But I think for most of us that have gone that go to schools rather than teach at schools, our experience is a little different. The creative output in a school is fairly defined. You know how many papers you're going to write, how many
yeah,
tests you're going to be.
yeah.
All of that is sort of given to you. Whereas I think the challenge with private enterprise is that the most important thing is content and execution.
Mm,
The reason that chief executive officer is the primary officer is it's about execution.
mm,
Our biggest challenges in the company are always going to be execution, and when we don't execute, that's my responsibility.
yeah,
I can
yeah,
have all the reasons in the world, and believe me, I do. I'm like, oh, we have this problem here and this challenge here, but at the end of the day, none of that matters. What only thing that matters is, do you produce? Are you
yeah,
producing
yeah,
results?
yeah.
Um,
And
and so,
that's a really interesting point you make there because it seems to me one of the differences between academic learning and business learning, for want of a way of describing it, is when you're at university and you're writing an essay, what you want to get is the right answer. You want to get the good score out, whatever.
right, that's right.
In business, it's not, there is no one right answer. There are good answers and there are answers that aren't so good, but there is no one right way to do anything, really.
Yeah,
And I think that's one of the other things that I think is different is in business, what you're constantly trying to do is to figure out the best answer for this context, which is very
yeah,
different, I think, like I said, I'm not knocking academia. I mean, I spent years studying,
sure,
but
sure.
it's a different experience to pick up your point.
It's a different experience, and it's also measured differently.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
know, if you're in academia, you do have to publish, and so anybody, for anybody who's watching this who's an academic, in no way is this taking away the importance of
yeah.
publishing and creating content. And my father certainly was incredibly prolific in his work. Um, it's also peer reviewed,
Mm,
especially in the sciences, as a way of validating where those answers are the best answers in that space. And that's how we kind of build that level of human knowledge and
mm.
expertise. The difference is in business, it's not so much peer review as it is the public review.
Yeah, the
You know,
market.
yeah, you put something out and it's
Yeah,
voted on by whether
yeah,
people use it or not.
yeah,
Now, there are great products that no question never make it to market or get to market, and because they came out at the wrong time or were marketed in the wrong way or were being promoted by the wrong company, they don't come to light, and we lose out on those technologies, and that's a shame. But for the most part, uh, you have to put it out there, and so you have to put it out there, and it's better to be out there with something that's
Mm.
really great but not perfect than to be this sort of academic polishing
Mm.
of getting everything just right. And I think there's nowhere there that's more evident than in software, which has really created this incredible wealth over the last, several decades. And they introduce products all the time that are in beta version and this version and all the
Yeah.
time, and
Yeah.
they're always patching it and updating it and all that. So that's sort of the perfect example of print, publish, get it out there, and then improve.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think every CEO can benefit from that mindset.
Yeah. I mean, you strike me as somebody that likes learning.
I do, I do. Maybe too much, um, because it takes time, and you have to be able to say we know enough. We got to make the call. We got to make the next choice. But yeah, I do like learning personally a lot. I think there is a very human trait. I think that the ethnographers and your anthropologists would refer to as mastery, the sense of mastery that human beings like. We love puzzles and completion. We like to watch the end
Yeah.
of a movie even when we know what's going to happen. I think learning is a version of that. And what's delightful about learning is if you watch a movie on Netflix, 9 out of 10 times, what's going to happen exactly at the end of it. You're just watching to see how it plays out. But with learning, you genuinely have the opportunity to bring new thoughts into your brain, into your mind, into your process, into your perspective. And so I think it's personally incredibly satisfying. But like I said, it's also can be a trap. You can analyze and study and get into that analysis paralysis, and you really do have to gather
Yeah.
the best information you can and then act on it.
Yeah. Somebody, I forget, somebody famous said, if there's no risk, there's no joy. And I think there's a lot of truth in that, which is partly why I suppose I like businesses, because building a business is all about taking a set of risks. I mean, I'm going to try this and see if it works, so you take a risk and maybe it plays out okay, maybe it doesn't, so that's one of the things I think is interesting. I mean, in an academic situation, you submit the essay or you submit the thesis and it gets scored and it passes or it doesn't. I mean, it's slightly different in a work in a business environment, which is partly why I enjoy that more, really. It's not, I've been
Yeah.
successful in academia, but I enjoy the risk bit more, I think. Let me ask you about the two sides to that. I mean, you've obviously had a lot of successes along the way with the business. I mean, what have those successes revealed to you about you, would you say?
Uh, that is really interesting. Uh, I think that I've learned, at least through what I've learned through success, that I'm constantly reminded of how little I know and how much more I need to learn. Uh, Almost every success uh, is a clarion call for humility almost
Mm,
immediately.
mm,
And I think when you're younger, you can get a little wrapped up in the idea of success and the trappings of success, or even just the general feeling of success, and that can warp
yeah,
your perspective. And one of the uh, things that I remember being hearing early in my career was, well, actually, it wasn't even early; it was probably mid-career. Was that if you really focused on your highest vision of what you're trying to do,
mm,
who am I? What am I trying to do? Why am I trying to do it? If you really focus on that, then both positive and negative feedback are just a distraction.
mm,
And I think we all understand how negative feedback is a distraction, right? We all understand that, like, naysayers, negativity, can't do it. All of that is a distraction to getting something done. But what we tend to underestimate is how much positive the success, the attaboys, the hey, that's great, you know, uh, is also a complete distraction. if you're really laser focused on your vision for something, and you know
Mm.
that it's grounded in who you are and why you're doing it, then one of the things to learn from success is to not get very wrapped up in it.
Mm. It's
Not to not.
illusory, isn't it? I mean, but Churchill, I think, said, success is not. Um, I can't remember his quote now. It was, success is not final, failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that matters. I think that's the quote from Churchill. And I
So
think it's sort of it's saying the same thing that you're saying, really.
yeah, well, to that extent, courage is a dedication to principle in the face of adversity, right? So to a certain extent, the courage becomes interchangeable for this notion of being really true to yourself. It's not. I don't think that there are a lot of people that talk about this type of thinking, but I think the real core point is that, like, that the positives and the negatives are not why you're doing it. Why you're doing
Mm.
it, and if your vision is only as good as the extent to which you understand yourself, your role in this
Mm.
world, this short-term role you have, and your dedication to doing something that has positive impact. Um, these are all judgment calls. They all inherently do have risk. I think that academics actually do take a lot of risk because they have to expose their thinking, not just their actions. In business, you're exposing actions to judgment and thinking, obviously. But in academia, when you submit that essay, you are literally being judged on what you think,
Mm.
and that can go to the core of identity. I think that that's very difficult
Yeah,
for
I
people
can
as
see
well.
that. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was talking about my experience of being a student rather than
Of
being an
course, yeah.
academic, if you see what I mean. And what would you say? I mean, just ask you a question that's sort of related to that. I mean, what would you say that you've learned from building a business?
Well, there are two very interesting threads on that. One is this, humility, people first
Mm. Mm.
thing, which you always hear from great leaders, and the experience of life just hammers home. It's like, oh, you know what? If you had listened to these people from day one that said your company is your people, the people that are in it, taking care of them is more important than any single contribution that you,
Mm.
as the CEO or idea genesis, whatever, are going to have. So I think that is something that is not only very true, but you'll be taught that lesson
Yeah,
painfully if you
yeah.
don't apply it. But I think there's something else interesting going on, is this notion of a one person company. We've got a number of people. We have some people in Europe. We have some people in the United States. Uh, but it used to be the metric of a company, and I'm not saying it's the right metric, but people say, I have a big company. Oh yeah, how many people are in it?
Mm.
That was something we might say 15, 20 years ago, or
Mm.
maybe even 5 years ago. But now, if you said, I have a company, and someone said, oh, how many people relevant to are relative to revenue do you
Mm.
have? Like, how much do you make per person?
Yeah,
Is a much
yeah,
much
yeah.
more focused on metric. I don't know how that metric plays out long term,
Mm.
but what I do know is that it's here and it's very real,
Mm.
because you can, and it has already been done. You can build $1 billion company with just one person if you're in the right place with the right idea. It's
Mm.
already happened.
Mm.
It's happened in the medical supply industry, just last year. And you're seeing it, $1 million businesses run by one person with AI agents and so forth,
Mm.
happening all the time now.
Mm. I mean,
Um,
I had one come on. I had somebody, a CEO, come on the podcast that had done that. I mean, he
okay.
wasn't a unicorn, but he'd got a multi-million-dollar company, and it's just him. It really is changing the way things work, with no shadow of a doubt. And one last thing before we wind up. I mean, given what you've just said, what advice would you offer to somebody perhaps starting out on a journey like yours, or wanting to do
Uh,
something similar?
prepare prepare for change. even this notion that the one person company, it won't be like that forever. The AI business industry is going to radically change. A couple of years ago, uh, Facebook was going to use all of their compute. Now they're you know ready to sell their, or lease out their extra compute to other companies. These things are changing. The AI
Yeah.
profile will change. We have trillions of dollars that have gone into this industry. That money's got to come back somewhere, or else it changes and slows down. If that slows down, and all of a sudden all the intelligence that we've been getting for bargain basement prices, if all that compute goes up in price, everything is going to change. All of a sudden, human beings will come back into vogue, just the way labor came back into vogue when it all went overseas for cheap labor, and then all of a sudden we had
Yeah.
uh, problems in technology and national security and things like that. We needed to bring those industries back. So I think that anybody starting this journey uh, has to do a little bit of soul searching
Mm.
and say, number one, am I working on something that it matters to me whether this happens?
Mm.
Because you will have dark days. You will have
Yeah.
challenging times. You will
Yeah.
doubt yourself, and everybody will doubt you along with yourself, with you. Um, and you have to have something tangible that you have at your core, that you believe this is the right thing. This should happen, and that's a little. There's a little Don Quixote in, I think, every CEO,
Mm.
that you're tilting at imaginary monsters, big windmills, um, but there's a fine line between that and just not doing it. I think also you have to be a little bit off or something to do it in the first place, because it does take sort of a relentless
Yeah.
optimism and a relentless drive to keep going.
Yeah. Which
So
and
that might,
I think it becomes addictive. I mean, that's my view about it. It's so interesting and engaging building a company that it's like, well, if I'm not doing that, what else am I going to do, really? So very interesting. Interesting.
it might be addictive. I have two very close friends. I won't say them by name on this because I didn't ask if I could, but they're very close friends from college. One of them I literally was texting with just this weekend. They started a company which they ended up selling for over $100 million, and it was based on ideas going all the way back to college at Purdue, where we all went. Uh, One of them went on to found more companies, continually investing, has
Mm.
just taken that money and turned it into, another 100 times as much. He's sort of relentlessly, as you might even say, addicted to
Mm.
the building game. But the other one didn't. As soon as they sold, he bowed out and has been more about personal growth, family.
Mm.
So I think it can be different. I think the journey is a little bit different for everyone. I think that partnerships can be both very, very challenging if they don't work out, but also can be work really well if you have two different types of personalities, where one of them can carry the burden of the relentless optimism, and the other one has sort of an operational execution mindset that can
And
work
it kind of
together.
comes back to the point you made right at the beginning about people being different, aren't they? I mean, that's the great thing about people is they're all different, I think, and people respond in different ways. I mean, that's a great piece of advice to end with there. Austin, thank you for making a bit of time to come and have a
Well,
chat. This whole thing about smart government, I mean, I love your ambition, wanting to do something about changing government, because that's a tough gig. But so good luck with it, because it needs doing, and if you can crack it, I mean, you'll make a lot of people happy.
follow us, Epira, on LinkedIn and on Instagram, and see what we're talking about. I think we have some very interesting ideas, and people are pretty excited. So uh, there'll be some big developments coming up in this year.
Look forward to hearing about them.
All
Thanks.
right, Paul.
See ya. Bye bye.
Great talking with you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.